Introducing Unlock My Coach, the soulful marketing agency for coaches. Let's unlock your next level together. Let's connect.
So success, how do I define it? It's about what lights me up. It's about what fulfills me today and what matters to me today. My life has changed. And so in any given moment, we have to just be aware about what matters to us. If it matters to me, then that is what the metric is for success. So while you don't know what it is today, you will figure it out soon enough. Keep going. You'll just think, I'm not good enough to do this. No, not the case at all. It doesn't impact or negatively impact your belief in yourself in being able to execute the work. Figuring out what is a problem that needs to be solved, what is a passion, developing a passion, how they develop in a healthy way, how they develop in toxic ways, everything. I want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly of passions. This is the real issue. It's about developing passion and purpose first. People needed help reinventing themselves. They didn't have a direction that they wanted to reinvent themselves into. This is what holds everything back. It's a process. We're going to develop clarity through action. We're going to take action. We're going to do something. The reinvention is a lot easier to do, or at least a lot less hard, when you know the target. So let's go, let's do this. And it's time to break up with the other one, because the other one's no longer doing it for me. And I started pursuing that relationship. I want you to be able to do more of the work. That's it. I want you to be able to perform. Step on the field, get ready to play. I'm going to send some people your way.
Welcome to Unlock My Coach, a podcast for seasoned, soulful, and successful coaches. In every episode, you'll hear incredible stories from coaches who are building their brands and making their mark in the booming $20 billion coaching industry. Who am I? Stacey Gonzalez, your host and founder of Unlock, a digital marketing and personal branding agency that helps coaches launch, market, and grow their businesses. Ready to unlock your coach? I know I've got your key in here somewhere. Welcome to today's podcast, where we're thrilled to have Roger Osorio, a reinvention coach with a unique talent for helping people discover, date, and develop healthy relationships with their passions and purpose. Roger's forward-thinking, action-oriented approach empowers individuals to explore and test their passions, all while building a personal brand and network that supports their next big reinvention. He works with young professionals, university students, and aspiring entrepreneurs, guiding them to step into their potential and chart bold new paths. Get ready to unlock some fresh new perspectives with us today on reinvention and take actionable steps towards creating a life that truly aligns with who you are. Roger, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have you.
Same here. It's kind of crazy. We've had quite the journey in getting to know each other. And it's awesome that you've launched this podcast to help other coaches or aspiring coaches, start figuring out that path to becoming one. So
thank you. Yeah.
Excited to help out.
What's interesting, I was thinking back to how we met, and I reached out to you over 5 years ago to be a guest speaker when I was still in education for one of our career day events. And we've stayed in touch, and I've gotten to watch your journey through reinvention, helping other people now reinvent. So I'd love to ask you, what is your definition of a reinvention coach?
So for me, a reinvention coach is someone that can help you figure out how you've evolved, how your interests, your passions, your values have evolved over time, because they likely have, especially if it's been many years since you've last checked in with them. And then what are you doing today? What does your life look like today? And is there an alignment there? And if there's not, then it's my mission to be able to help you build that life that is now more in line with who you are today and what matters to you.
I love that. So this idea of reinventing, from going from who you were to who you now see yourself kind of becoming.
Yeah.
And as you think of back, right, to those early days, and you kind of go back in your mind when you first got it started, how did you find yourself and define yourself as a reinvention coach?
So a big part of it came from just walking the journey myself. I had done that since 2008 when I quit my first corporate job in order to become a math teacher. I used to sell commercial refrigeration. My account was Anheuser-Busch. So nothing related to working with high schoolers and middle schoolers. And then I made this massive transformation into becoming a math teacher. And then from there, as my interests, as my passions evolved, I made sure to then evolve the other parts of my life to keep them in sync with that. So my jobs changed, the work I was doing changed, the kinds of folks I worked with changed. And so when I hit in 2020 during COVID, when I got laid off, I took it as an invitation. that maybe this is my opportunity to think about how can I take all of these years, and at that point it was about 15 years of my own personal reinvention experience, and how can I help others do that? And so it was back in 2020, middle of 2020, when I set on this journey to figure out what that really meant. And that's a whole nother story of just how I got clarity into what it meant to become someone who could help another person reinvent themselves.
I love that. And I love that you say it took time. It took time to get to that place. Was it natural for you? Was this kind of journey in reinvention? Was this something you were super conscious of, and you were like, I see this thing and I'm going to change this. I see this. Or was it subtle and like evolved with you as you kind of started taking the steps?
Well, in hindsight, it was, I knew what was happening only because when I started writing my book, I reflected on the early reinventions and I saw, oh my gosh, it's the same thing happening now. Like I'm living what I lived to become a math teacher, except now it's to become something else. And it was really interesting to go through that process and become really aware of it. But the truth was, as I was going through it, I wasn't totally aware. I was going through the ups and downs. I would say the only advantage I had was simply that I was, perhaps because I had reinvented myself in the past, I was a little more confident navigating some of that uncertainty. That said, there was still a lot of pain, a lot of struggle. It was difficult at times. I backed off the journey at one point and went back to other kind of work that was in my comfort zone, if you will, in terms of I knew I could get those gigs easily. Not what I enjoyed the most and not where I wanted to go, but once upon a time I liked this. So, I could still get through this and I could still do this and not hate what I'm doing. And I had to go through that. And so it was I call it a 4-year journey to get absolutely clear on who it is that I want to serve, how I want to serve them, and what it is that I have learned they want and need. But that took 4 years to get there.
Wow. As I listen to you kind of share that journey, I'm wondering about those ups and downs. I'm wondering about the moments where you said, like, I backed off. I stepped back. I was going to do what made me comfortable. I was going to go back to kind of that comfort zone. And I have one thing for myself that's really comfortable. It's a chair in my house that I really enjoy sitting in. That's about the only space and place where I allow myself to stay in my comfort zone, on this one chair in my living room. So what happened that brought you back there? And then how did you kind of pull yourself out? Because I feel like that's something that's really hard when you're first starting.
Yes, I'll give a very specific example. So when I got laid off, in the final 30 days I had at IBM, I launched a reinvention mastermind. I had only just learned what mastermind meant. I had taken some training on how to facilitate a mastermind group, and there was an opportunity to help the other people that were getting laid off with me. I felt pretty comfortable in figuring out what my next chapter was going to be, because I'd already done that several times. I had been fired, I'd been laid off before, I've quit. So I've left in all the ways you could leave, whether it's, voluntarily or involuntarily. And so I felt a certain level of confidence, and a mentor of mine at the company said, you're going to be fine because you know how to figure it out. You know how to figure out the next step. And so while you don't know what it is today, you will figure it out soon enough. But I'm concerned about the folks who have been at the company for decades, for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And IBM is a company that is known for having a lot of people who had been there for a very long time. And unfortunately, the layoffs affected a lot of people who had been there 10, 15, 20 years. And so she challenged me to find a way to help them. And I thought, well, if I could start to figure out what it is that I learned along the way when I took all these twists and turns in my career and I reinvented myself, maybe some of that could help them write a new chapter in their lives at this stage, wherever they were in their careers. And so I started putting that mastermind together, executed that over the course of about 3.5 weeks. And then it was towards the end of those 3.5 weeks that I had an idea for a product. What if I kept the mastermind going? What if I offered a 3-month extension to this thing, but for a fee? And it was, first of all, the scariest thing ever to now pitch this thing for money. This thing
and
that
ask
I had just
people
done
to
for free.
give you money. Yeah. Totally.
It was, and I want to just really go deep on how scary it was, because I'm going to set up the context. They had retraining money that they were given by IBM. I think it was $2,500.
So you knew they had money to invest in this.
As long as I could generate a certificate for them and a receipt, of this professional development training that I was going to put them through, it wasn't even going to be their own money. So this should have been, I mean, a slam dunk, a home run, whatever sport you like, a touchdown. This should have been easy. And I was still like scared to death of making that pitch. But I did make it.
Do you think, can I pause
Yeah.
you there? Because this is a very, whether people can articulate this or not early on, I think there's something around mindsets and beliefs that I sense when I'm talking to people when they are the product and the service and the offering. And they are the one who is like having to showcase themselves. There's nothing to point to necessarily.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how you worked through that?
Yeah, you know, I became really aware that I was bold, fearless, courageous when it came to selling someone else's stuff. You know, when I was acting as a facilitator for Startup Weekend, you know, global organization that hosts these 3 days entrepreneurship boot camps all around the world, I would organize events in Manhattan. I got people to give me venues in Manhattan for free to do these events. I got sponsors to sign up to the tune of 10, 15, 20, 30,000 even, when most organizers were at best getting $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 from a sponsorship. I just had all of, and then all of a sudden when it was my thing, I thought, awesome, been there, done that. I know what to do. And then it was just not the case. It did not apply in the same kind of way, because all of a sudden, to your point, I became the product, and I didn't have this like entity to hide behind, or this kind of this entity that I could just act on behalf of.
Yeah, and it's almost like you, and when you're just starting too, you don't really know what you have. Like you don't know all of how it works, and right, you don't have a history, a historical. So you really are operating from a very faith, trust of yourself, like whatever that zone is, that internal zone where you've got to get really confident in yourself. How do you now that you're at this place now, how do you define success as a reinvention coach?
So I think I want to take one quick step back, because I want to talk about that, you know, even in the face of positive reinforcement, I still was scared, and I still pulled back on that product. So to close out that story about that product, I launched that product, I delivered it. And when it came to the last week of that product, people were in the program were asking, what's next? I didn't even design a next step. I didn't even follow up on their asks, because I was just like afraid to, for some reason. And I couldn't figure, it took me another 4 years to reflect on that. And only recently, I would say this year in 24, did I finally figure out what happened in 2020, like that, what held me back, that I was just scared to follow that up. I started really thinking more about it. But I didn't do anything with the success of that. And by the way, wildly successful. They were all like, this was a game changer. I needed this. I heard all those things, so much positive reinforcement. And even still, something held me back from doing the next thing. And some even said, what's next? I want to sign up to do the next thing. What's the next thing? What else can we do together? And I did not follow it up with anything. And what I ended up doing was I just went back to consulting gigs that felt comfortable. Speaking engagements that are fun because I enjoy speaking, but not what I really wanted to be speaking about or doing. A lot of MC gigs for like major events and all of that stuff. There were a lot of virtual events, and they really needed a certain kind of person who could do a virtual MC gig. So I just kind of started falling into that, but I didn't really want to do that. But I shouldn't say falling into it. I dove. I ran towards that because I was running away from this other thing that honestly had proven itself. And so I had that initial success, and I still, ran away. And I'm going to use the term run away because I really did run away from it. And it wasn't until I started writing for my blog and then writing the book that I came back to reinvention. And I said, there's something here. And this book is showing it to me right now. It's proving it. And I got to keep going. And so to answer that last question about success, how do I define it? I mean, there's, so many ways, but it's really, it's about what lights me up. It's about what fulfills me today and what matters to me today. My life has changed. I have a 2-year-old now. So if you had asked me 3 years ago, I couldn't tell you that my 2-year-old is a big part of how I define success and her happiness and what we do together and the time we spend together. But that's now a part of my life. So see, these things, like things change. And so in any given moment, we have to just be aware about what matters to us. If it matters to me, then that is what the metric is for success.
Yeah, when we have those moments, when we look back and we see our past self with crystal clear clarity, we're like, oh, those were the patterns, those were the limiting beliefs, the mindset spaces. And when you said you were running away, what kind of kept coming up for me is like, we run away from this higher version of ourselves, this best version, this ideal state, because we don't really know who we are when we're going to be there, because it's not who we are today. And so there's this like almost, disconnect, if you will, inside of our psyche. And so it's really hard to push through that sometimes if you don't have somebody like a coach saying like, okay, we're going to get through this. It's going to be really hard here. You're going to have you're going to feel like you're going to feel really dumb when you send the thing out, or when you get on to say, your first discovery call and right? Like all of the things. So it's so valuable that you went through it and then you're able to bring others through it. Yeah. What would you say when you think about the areas that are lessons? I don't really like to say failures or mistakes. I just think they're all lessons. That's the teachers in us, right?
Yes.
But like,
I hear that.
So that others can avoid, or others can be aware that these things might be coming at you when you first start to launch your coaching business. That's not like people, a lot of times, what's a coach? I don't know what a coach is. How does that work, right? So what kind of mistakes or lessons could you share?
Yeah, big lesson is there's a massive difference between the work you do and marketing and selling the work you do. These are two very different things. And if you bring them together and you think they're one and the same, it's easy to say that my product, my service doesn't work because it's not selling. No, your product or service probably works. Maybe it doesn't, but chances are it does. Especially if you have experience and the proper training and all of that in coaching, it will likely work. What's not working is something in your marketing. And if you don't separate those two, you might end up walking away from this altogether, because you'll just think, I'm not good enough to do this. That's why I'm not selling. It's because I'm not good enough. No, not the case at all. It has nothing to do with you not being, it's a marketing challenge. So if you know your product is spot on because maybe you've done the work in other settings, maybe not as an entrepreneur, but perhaps in corporate or in another type of setting, and you know you can get the job done, then be very careful that you're not being able to sell it the way you were hoping it would sell right away doesn't impact or negatively impact your belief in yourself in being able to execute the work. And I think that's super, super important. I mean, obviously, you know this because you help with the marketing side. And that's important because you're helping a coach, I think, separate those two. Like, I'm not going to do the coaching for you. That's not what Stacy does. That's not what her company does. We help you with the marketing part. I want you to be able to do more of the work that you do, that you 100%. Want to do. That's it. I want you to be able to perform. So I'd rather you just step on the field, get ready to play. I'm going to send some people your way, and I'm going to show you how to build that system to get people in that arena with you.
And it's hard at the beginning because I know for me in the branding and the work I do in this, which is similar, right? You're building a business. I didn't know what I didn't know until I worked with one particular coach whose name is Catherine. And that experience with that person at that time, it was like, aha, like it just opened it up. But I wouldn't have been able to do that 3 years ago because we would have never met, right? So sometimes it's just a matter of you put the things out, you think you have clarity, and then you find out you try something for 90, 180 days, and you're like, yep, let's kind of position. And then I think you just lock in. And for you, it sounds like it took you 3 years, 4 years, and then you just when you locked in, you just you knew.
Yeah, and the 3-4 year journey is probably the other lesson that I would talk about. And what I worked on in those 3 to 4 years was figuring out who my ideal client is, as well as what is the problem that I need to be solving. What is the problem that needs to be solved? And I thought originally when I got into this that people needed help reinventing themselves. It seemed like that was the challenge. And it turned out through experience and bringing clients on who were like, yes, I want to reinvent myself. When I started working with them, I very quickly discovered that they didn't have a direction that they wanted to reinvent themselves into. They didn't have a target for that reinvention. They kind of did, but they didn't feel confidently clear about it. They weren't confident about that direction. So when it came time to start experimenting and running prototypes, wait, but what if this is not it? like, what do you mean, what if this is not it? You said this is what you wanted to reinvent yourself into. And so what I discovered was that that's not where most of the problem lies. That still is a problem. People still do need help with the reinvention in and of itself. But the reinvention is a lot easier to do, or at least a lot less hard, when you know the target. And that's where I'm focusing today. That's where I'm finally focused, because I realized this is what people need help with most, is figuring out what it is that they want to do, what it is that they like, what is a passion, developing a passion. I'm reading a ton on the psychology of how passions develop, how they develop in a healthy way, how they develop in toxic ways, everything. I want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly of passions. And the more I get into it, the more I realize, wow, this is a bigger problem. And I didn't realize that when I got into this. But this is the real issue. Like, this is what holds everything back. And if I can work on this first, then perhaps later I can create another product for someone who's, I'm absolutely clear on what I want. I want to become a math teacher, and I'm in sales currently. Awesome. Then let's get on that path, because I can help you with that too. But right now I realize there's a more urgent need, and it comes before all of this. And it's in figuring out it's about developing passions and purpose first.
Yeah. It's an interesting point, because the clarity piece, like clear confidence, right? You talked about this clear confidence, and that clarity piece of it is the thing I notice the most, right? So I have individuals that are the coaches. Right? I have a coaching lens. I have coaching certification, right? Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't call myself a coach as much as I would call myself maybe a marketer or a business developer or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes I know when somebody is not ready for me. And I'm like, you need to actually go work with a coach to get the clarity, because you're still really uncertain. Yeah. And that's I love when clients come in and they're like, I want to do this. I want to be here in 3 years. I want to use this. Here's the things I know, and have the confidence around that. And and it's not about pretending, but even if you're not 100% certain, you've got to go in. And I love what you're saying about prototyping. I look at all of the work we do in marketing as experimenting. Yeah. I didn't know I loved science and experimenting until I found it in a creative space. I was like, they should have taught this in school. I would have loved this, right? Yeah. So I think when it comes to the experimenting, you call it prototyping. I call it experimenting with social media. I use LinkedIn as my primary product experimentation space. Mm-hmm. How do you help coach it, or the people you're helping reinvent themselves? How do you help them, or how do you think about even positioning yourself and putting yourself out into the world?
Yeah, so this is a really good, exciting question, because these are the months that I've been working on it. Ever since about May is when it really hit me, and I started getting really clear about this, and I've been working on this since May. And so when I think about how I position myself, I am currently looking at, where do people need help getting clear on what it is that they want to do, or where do they need help developing clarity? Is even better, because I like the word developing, because that's really what I'm helping you do. It's not about finding it. It's not, you're just not gonna, oh my gosh, I just uncovered it. No, it's a process. We're going to develop clarity through action. We're going to take action. We're going to do something, a prototype, an experiment, in order to start developing that clarity. So it's not even an experiment for the sake of, let me see if I like this or not. No, it's actually an experiment for the sake of, let me begin developing a relationship with this thing and see if it goes further.
I want to just pause that. Developing a relationship. It's almost like what clicked was like developing a relationship with an idea and a new version of yourself. You're like, you're really taking them through conceptualizing this like idea. I love that. That's a great way to put that.
And and when I look back at my own story, I realized, wait a minute, I didn't notice this part of my story, but I did exactly that. When I made the decision to quit corporate and become a math teacher, a lot of people thought, dude, that's crazy. That's just nuts and wild. You took this like crazy risky leap or whatever, or, the spontaneous. Like, no, there wasn't anything spontaneous about it. I had tutored for 1 year while working in my day job. So in the evenings, I tutored math, and I had 1 year of dating math to realize I want to be with you. Yeah. And now I got to go have that awkward conversation where I'm like, it's not you, it's me. I got to break up.
Only a math teacher would say that, right? Like,
yeah. And so that's what I've realized is that's what made it so, I don't want to say easy, but it gave me so much confidence and clarity to pursue that reinvention, because I had spent a year dating math. So I knew with absolute certainty that this is who I wanted to be in a relationship with. So let's go, let's do this. And it's time to break up with the other one, because the other one's no longer doing it for me. And so boom, I broke up and I started pursuing that relationship. And so in the same way that I want to help people do that, one of the ways that I'm helping people to do that is by helping them start a podcast, because a podcast gives them an excuse to go interview people who are currently doing that work, which is another way of dating.
Everything is market research, right? If you can
at the end of the day,
you can just think, I want to be a coach, and I pick a thing. I love that you're doing podcasts. Pick a thing. Post on LinkedIn. Pick a thing. Do a weekly group. Invite people to a weekly webinar. Call it whatever you want. Do something that puts you in a position of taking some sort of action. Because otherwise it's too easy to get stuck in analysis paralysis and ideas that don't go anywhere. So I love how
and one layer on top of that, do it publicly as well.
Do publicly.
Because and not even for the accountability, but more so for the brand building. Because if you do this for a year, so imagine, I'm not ready to quit my job. Great. I don't want you to quit your job. What I want you to do is launch a podcast, and I want you to commit to one interview per week. That's it. One interview per week. So you got to talk to one human each week. Not hard to do. And then you're not going to edit that podcast episode that much, because your goal is not to create the greatest podcast on earth. It's simply to go out and interview all these people. But what I want is for the work to be public, so that when a year passes and you've decided, oh my gosh, I want to become a math teacher, and some percentage, like 20% of those people you interviewed were math teachers, I want that content to live online.
You know how I got my first one-on-one client for Unlock? They were a guest on my podcast.
There you go. It's the relationship. And that's the other thing. I think you and I talked about this once upon a time. It's the podcasting relationship. It's so weird. I still don't know why, but it is so much stronger than getting coffee with somebody and picking their brain over
because there's a container around it. There's a little bit of a container and expectation, and a little bit of a formality, right? And preparation.
Formality, yes. Like we got to level up.
We got to level
have to
up.
show
And
up.
There's a formality, and I agree with you. I loved the build in public, right? Like that whole movement that happened, because that really just puts you in real time. And for people like me and you who came from education, where I literally could have a plan a year ahead of time and guarantee this thing's going to happen on this day, the build in public things, I do a bi-monthly free, like open exchange networking every other, Wednesday. And it's free. And it's just, I create the container. So you just pick the things. But even in that, I'm new at that. Like I know I'm just starting, and it's okay to say, I just launched this in August and I'm just starting. It's only been 4 months. So be kind to yourself too. Okay. I want to jump into our favorite part of this podcast, where I put you on the hot seat. Cool. And so I'm going to ask you questions, and I'm going to ask you to the hot seat. You got to answer quick, and what inspires comes out of you. Okay. So are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. The value of working with a coach is
clarity and breakthrough.
The book I always recommend.
How Will You Measure Your Life by Clay Christensen.
The superpower I bring to my clients.
Active and deep listening.
My first client taught me that.
You have to dance with them in the moment.
One non-negotiable value.
Trust, honesty, kind of like two sides of the same coin, I guess.
The wildest dream I'm manifesting right now is
having written a book.
I charge and refocused by
spending time with my little girl.
If my coaching business was a song, it would be,
oh gosh, that's a tough one. That's the toughest one. I have to pass.
The biggest unlock I've learned being a coach.
Biggest unlock has been listening for what people say that they're not even hearing themselves say, which means I'm also doing it too.
That's a good one. Who is the coach you most admire?
There is a woman that I worked with for a couple of years, Maria Saab, and I follow her on Instagram, and she is just an incredible, incredible woman. And she is actually in Beirut right now, which has been under attack. And to see how much strength she has in this moment to be able to find the way to continue to add value to the people that she wants to serve, just mind blowing. Like how she's so committed to her coaching, her work, her message, that even as missiles are falling in her city, she is showing up. I honestly, like, I don't even get it. I'm just blown away. So most inspiring right there.
Thank you for sharing. Final question. In 5 years, I hope people understand the coaching industry is
a necessity.
Roger Osorio, a reinvention coach. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. If people want to find you, where can they go?
Best place would be LinkedIn, I think, but they could also come to my website, rogerosorio.com.
Thank you for being here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. Appreciate you.